So I want to start by saying, first of all, that there's a ton of privacy and security tools out there. There's a million things for people who want to improve their online security and their online privacy. But there's only about probably 4 or 5 that I recommend just to the average person who is not super tech savvy, who just kind of wants to improve their privacy in some tangible way, but still have that user experience that they're used to from their Mac or from whatever Google offers. And so there's Proton Mail, I recommend all the time. There's the Brave browser, and now Brave Talk, which is what we're recording on. I always recommend a password manager, 1Password or Bitwarden are my favorites. And maybe, a VPN, Molvad VPN I like a lot. And then there's Standard Notes. I love Standard Notes. I use it for everything. I use it when I'm writing comedy. I use it when I'm doing grocery lists. When I find a quote that I like that I want to pass off as my own, I put it in a Standard Notes so I can look it up real fast. I just love Standard Notes. I recommend it to everyone, and the user experience is just great. If you're used to Apple Notes, and I'm sure Google has something similar, Microsoft, I'm sure has something similar. Standard Notes just works really, really well. It's a very easy transition for anyone who's used to the normal Notes app. So that's why I'll recommend it. I think if I can get my parents using it, that's sort of my test of can the average person use it? And Standard Notes works well for everyone. So I just want to say it's an absolute great tool. That's why I wanted to talk to you. But so if we could just talk about what Standard Notes is and why you started it.
Yeah, Standard Notes is it started as a simple private note-taking app. And the reason I started it, there's 2 things that I was really interested in. One was note-taking. For some reason, I've just always been interested in note-taking and writing. And I guess the writing aspect started in my 20s when I had an enlightenment where I got into a whole bunch of topics and books and things that I hadn't sort of, the things you don't learn in school. And I guess, that developed this sort of obsession with jotting things down. And Standard Notes probably is not my first note-taking app. I've probably built 4 or 5, nothing that you'll find online now, but I've always been interested in just the simplest form of note-taking, because applications tend to be complex. They tend to overdo it. And as a principal, I'm always focused on simplicity when it comes to design and development. And so in 2016, when Standard Notes came about, I had sort of, it was an interesting time because I was dabbling with sort of privacy-oriented crypto technologies like Monero. And it was 2 years after the Snowden revelations. And it was just the right, you couldn't really, by that point, you couldn't forego privacy or encryption anymore. It just didn't feel right. There was a time when I was prototyping with this app that I showed it to a friend and I said, register for an account. And, while he was saving the data, this was just the interface part. I hadn't really built all the other data encryption parts. I was able to see his thoughts, in the database. I just opened a database browser just because I wanted to debug an issue, and I was able to see what he was thinking and what he was writing about. And it felt very, very wrong. And I was like, okay, no, we're doing encryption right now. We're not putting that off. So that's where it came from. And it turned out to be a very timely development because probably just about 1 or 2 months after we launched, and, we launched kind of there wasn't a launch date. I had learned that the right way to build a product was in the open. And the number one mistake you can make is to, in my experience, at least, not for everyone, but in my experience, the number one mistake you can make is working on something in private for 6, 7 months, a year, and then all of a sudden having a big launch day. And typically just nothing happens on the launch day. So what I did here was from day one, I just developed in the open. There was no launch day. And 2 months after that point, Evernote released an update to their privacy policy where they said that their employees were now going to start scanning user notes. And the internet world just didn't like that at all. They said, these are our notes. This is our most private parts. These are our thoughts. And this is where we plugged Standard Notes, and people started looking for alternatives, and they found Standard Notes. They enjoyed the simplicity. They enjoyed the fact that it just worked. It was cross-platform. And so these are the core tenets of Standard Notes. One, you have the simplicity. the standardness. And what that means is just that it's easy to use, it's unsophisticated, it doesn't try to bog you down in complex details. Two, the second tenet is privacy, encryption, security. These things are very hard to get right and to get down, and it takes years and audits. And it's why most companies and most products don't bother with security, because it's just much easier to go focus on other niches. For us, this is something that I'm just really interested in, and there was no other way but to build this product because I needed it, I wanted it. And so we have what's called end-to-end encryption, and what that means is that every little keystroke that you type on your device is encrypted with a key that only you know, that exists on your device, that is never sent to any server. And then this encrypted data of your notes are pushed or synced to the cloud, your account. Then when you go on your other device, so let's say you're on your iPhone and you want to access your notes from your desktop, you go on the desktop app, you sign in. What happens is the desktop app takes your password that you sign in from, transforms your password into an encryption key, downloads the encrypted data from the cloud, and decrypts your data. And so the server at no point can decipher your data. The server has no idea what you're thinking, what you're talking about. And that is a really important property of privacy that we'll talk about the benefits of that. Why that's important, why end-to-end encryption is for everyone and not just for like hardcore security nerds and companies. And the last component that's really important for us is the cross-platform nature, where we are available on every single platform: web, Linux, Mac, Windows, Android, iOS. And that's really important. And that was from day one. I mean, the Android app came a little late, but from day one, that was the goal, was to make sure we were available on every platform, because a lot of apps are very constrained to like certain ecosystems. You have so many like Mac OS or Apple oriented note-taking apps, and you find that at some point you're just unable to access your notes from the web or from a Windows computer. And so for data portability, for accessibility, for exportability, for ownership, cross-platform access is really important for us. And so these three tenets are somewhat unique, I think, in the note-taking, file storage, or file management, I guess, ecosystem. And so we're really proud of that. And, we built a product that's really easy to use. I mean, in terms of whether it's easy enough for our mothers to use, I haven't tested that yet. I should actually test that. But it is definitely a goal. If anything, when we're talking about security, we do abstract away security from the end user, so that you're not really, typically security products can be, or historically they can be, a little bit cumbersome or dense. And in our case, we really try to hide that from you, so that you really don't know that you're dealing with encryption at any point. It's just there. It just works. You can't turn it off. It's just the way it all works. All you need is that one password to remember, and the rest just works. And so that is the basic premise behind Standard Notes: privacy, simplicity, and cross-platform availability.
So what got you into privacy in the first place? Was it the Snowden stuff? Is that why, you said you were always interested in notes? So how did that cross it with the privacy side?
I ask myself that question a lot. Like, why am I so private? Because I'm a private person, but I wasn't always this way. Because I remember being like a clown, and not like a serious clown, but like I was very, not
We're
so
all clowns here,
serious
I
in
guess.
high
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess it started happening in my 20s, when I sort of distanced myself from, I guess, all the people that I had grew up with, the culture that I grew up with. I distanced myself from all that, and I sort of ventured out on my own. And I don't know. I guess that made me sort of a recluse, where I guess that's probably where it mostly stems from, is that during my 20s, I was just sort of always locked up in some kind of office or bedroom or another, coding up some project. And you start to get really quiet when you're coding, and you start to be the type of person that can't be disturbed, because it's very precarious when you're coding. Any little disturbance can get you off track. And so, yeah, it just creates this disposition where You're quiet and you're private and you're reserved. So that's like, if we're tracing it back all the way, that's probably where it starts. But in recent times, of course, it's much more concrete. Where without privacy, you're just not safe online.
Right.
Um, the internet's a very scary place. That much is clear, and it's wonderful in many regards, but you have to be careful. And people want your data. People can benefit from your data, and even if they can't benefit from it, people can use your data against you. Not just the government, but people can. I don't want to say bullying, because it's not like bullying, but people can, I don't know, weaponize your personality, your traits, your interests, your hobbies, your thoughts. It can all be turned. Have you been on Twitter? Like it's Wild West over there.
Yep.
So yeah, so in many regards, I have a blog where I'm very careful about how I talk about things, but I'm extremely inactive on Twitter. I'd love to be active. I'd love to be like a 100K tweeter type person. Those people that have 100,000 tweets, like I envy them so much, because they just don't care. Like,
right.
just have my thoughts, world. Like, you can have them all, 20, 30 thoughts a day. Yeah, I'd love to be that person, because it's really good for marketing. But alas, here I am. So yeah, at some point it just became self-evident that you have to protect yourself online. You have to close guard your data, especially if we're talking about passwords and keys and cryptocurrency keys. That becomes really important. But even when it comes to your thoughts, I think more than ever, we're starting to see just how easy it is to weaponize almost any philosophical thought today, or any sort of opinion. And it's just not safe for you to, if you care about your future, if you care about investing in the next 30, 40 years of your life, you have to protect the things that are dear to you. You have to be careful with where you're putting your data and your information, especially anything controversial. And so, yeah, Standard Notes is a place to think freely, is a place to do your best work. And you need encryption for that. You need to feel like you're not being watched, because the feeling that someone is watching you just makes you act different. As soon as you close the curtains in your house, you exhale, like you just, it's a different sort of freedom. It's like, all right, imagine you have a room that just windows, just in the middle of the city, windows everywhere. You're not gonna move. You're just gonna be paralyzed to act. Whereas the moment you have privacy, you exhale and you're able to finally act yourself, or whatever you want yourself to be. And it's the same thing with privacy online. If you're using Google Docs, if you're using Evernote, there's an ever-present chance that what you're saying there will one day be seen by an employee, will be leaked, will be hacked, will be stolen. And who knows how it'll make you look? Who knows how it will be used? I mean, I could give you 10 ways all this could be used, but the point is it's open-ended. You don't know how these things will evolve. And I think it's going to be increasingly important, more and more, that we safeguard even the most trivial of our thoughts, if we care about protecting ourselves. So Standard Notes is that place, and it seemed prudent to build something. It was a tiny bit ahead of its time in terms of like 1 to 2 years, and now privacy is on sort of everyone's mind. It wasn't like that in 2016. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't in the foreground the way it is now. And so it's very clear now that you almost can't have a real sort of protective note-taking app if it's not focused on privacy encryption. You can, but it changes the sort of documents and thoughts you can put in there.
And the way you explain it is exactly how I came to Standard Notes. Because, if I'm writing comedy and I'm writing, a particularly dark joke, I start in the back of my mind. If I'm writing on Apple Notes, you think about these articles you read about, who can read these, and the fact that these companies have access to what you're writing. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to write that word down. And I like having an app where I can write as opposed to a physical notebook, because it's easier to organize things and to find. If I'm trying to find an old joke that I wrote, I want to be able to look at it on my phone. But the Apple Notes, you get this thing in the back of your head of like, do I want this word written down, knowing that there's a possibility someone can see it? And that's why Standard Notes, like knowing that it is end-to-end encrypted. And I want to talk a little bit more about that and why you started with that, and knowing that your first goal is privacy. I feel much more comfortable writing on Standard Notes than I would another app. How do you, because the fact is that people are still writing it on an iPhone or on a Mac or in on a in Chrome. How do you kind of find that balance, or is it just something you just kind of have to accept that these big companies are still setting up the hardware for your app, and the most you can do is create better software? Is that kind of how you think about it?
I mean, privacy is, look, if you want really hardcore security or privacy, just cut the cord on the back of your computer, cut the internet cord, and you don't have to worry about a thing. But as soon as you get on the internet, you're gonna have to trade a little bit. And so there is no such thing as perfect privacy or perfect security. It is a sort of it's a sort of meter that you have to decide, what is your threat model? What are you trying to protect against? And I think it's okay that everyone. I think a lot of people will try to advocate for some universal threat model where everyone should protect their search queries from Google. Everyone should use Firefox or Brave and not use Google Chrome. But I don't think that's I don't think that should be the case. I think it's okay that everyone has their own threat model. I think for you, you have to decide what is important to you. What do you want to protect? For some people, their search queries are just not that important. For me, I'll just honestly say, my search queries, I don't care who has them, because I'm not dumb enough to. I don't say dumb, but I'm not searching anything provocative. And if I have to search something provocative, maybe I want to search something to learn about it for historical purposes, I'll go use DuckDuckGo or something. But if I want to get the best results, I know where that is. We all know Google has the best results. DuckDuckGo is close. Brave Search, pretty good. But it's up to you to decide what are the things you want to protect, and where are you okay selling a little bit of your privacy for productivity. And this is something that I struggled with. And if you asked me the same question 6 months ago, I would have given you a different answer, where I would have said, yeah, don't use Google, don't use Google Chrome. And, the reason I struggled with that was, for about 6 years building Standard Notes, I was completely off the grid in terms of my voice on the internet, my face on the internet. I kept it all offline. It just felt weird to me to put a video of yourself online like forever and ever, because once it's there, it's never coming off. How do I know I won't say the wrong thing? So I just didn't play that game, and I just felt way more comfortable just being offline. My work was on the internet, my code was, my product was, but I didn't feel the need to have to go talk about it online. Let the product speak for itself. The problem was that that's just kind of not the way it ends up working. As a CEO, as a founder, you have to go talk about your product. You have to be online. It builds trust for your face to be online, for people to hear your voice. It builds a lot of trust. And so when you miss all those things, you'll have a harder time doing marketing. I have turned down podcast requests over the last 6 years that would have been really good for marketing. I've turned down conference speaker opportunities that would have been great for marketing, all because I'm private. I'm a private person. I don't want to be recorded. And so I was so private that it just held me back, and I ended up losing. Like, it ended up being a net loss for me to be that private. And so at that point is when I said, okay, I need to dial this back a little bit. What am I trying to accomplish here? What is the point of privacy? Where is privacy important, and where is it just too much? Because like when you go to the grocery store, no one feels weird about being in a grocery store. There's cameras everywhere. People can see you. You might end up being on a random TikTok, but nobody feels weird about that. It's just like, it's normal. You have no privacy in a grocery store, but you don't feel that you need it because it's a grocery store. It's the real world. And so in that sense, I sort of felt like, okay, well, maybe my face isn't as private as I think it is, or it's weird saying it, but this is how I felt. It's just like, I'm sure I'm not the only one online who's a bit afraid of just being out there. It's just, but if you could go walk outside, if you can go downtown in a busy shopping center or street, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, people see you, they pass by, they really don't care. They don't look back. And at that point is sort of when I realized, okay, I need to choose my privacy a little better. Like, this has gone on too far. I've hurt myself. I've not benefited, and I am thus a horrible marketer. Um, and my privacy maximalization has hurt my sort of marketing efforts. And so now I'm able to do podcasts like this, whereas in the past I just would have said no. So you have to choose privacy, what privacy means to you. And for me, I've chosen to focus on security rather than privacy. And these are two different concepts, which I don't know if a lot of people think about or understand the difference between. But security to me is very hardcore. It's very much about like protection, and safeguarding your sort of, you choose what to secure. It's like you have a house and you have a vault. You don't put everything in the vault because then it'll be really inconvenient. And so for me, I've chosen what I want to protect, and that's the obvious stuff. It's my notes, my files, my passwords, my keys, my legal documents, financial documents, tax documents. These are all things that need to be secure and encrypted. If you're not encrypting this stuff, you need to stop. You need to go and encrypt this stuff. I don't care what you use. You have to use encryption for this sort of things because, we talked about that. But privacy, on the other hand, is a lot more soft core. You don't really say, I want privacy for my legal documents. It doesn't sound sufficient to say that. You don't say, I want privacy for my cryptocurrency keys. So that doesn't make sense. You want security for those keys. What you want privacy for is, see, that's the point, is that privacy is amorphous. It's like, what does it mean? What do you mean privacy? Privacy from who? From whom? And I guess when we're talking about privacy, typically we're referring to privacy from, I don't know. I guess typically we're talking about privacy from third-party corporations, corporations sharing data with one another. We don't want that. We don't want Google selling our advertising or our usage or behavioral data to other companies. So privacy is a little vague of a term, and it's why I struggled with it. It wasn't until I sort of ditched that term and started focusing on security that I finally felt closure and resonance, where it just made sense now that, okay, my focus is security. Privacy, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? What does privacy mean to you? I don't know if you've thought about it.
Yeah, to me, privacy comes down to, the important thing to me is choice. It's, you choosing to go on a podcast and put your face out there publicly. That's a decision you made on your own, knowing the costs and the benefits. So to me, that's not a violation of privacy. Maybe you're surrendering some of your privacy, but there's no violation happening. So I guess to me, it's the violation. It's when when you go on Facebook, and this is, I get into this with other lawyers all the time, is, you have these long agreements that you have to accept anytime you go on any website. And in there, it basically says that they can sell your data if they want to. And so lawyers would tell you, well, you've made that choice, that you've agreed to these terms of Facebook to be able to use Facebook. And to me, you can't actually, I know people have actually done the math on this, that if you actually read all of the terms that you're agreeing to on every single website, you literally couldn't, in the course of a lifetime, actually comprehend all of these terms that you're agreeing to. So to me, there's not actually a choice there. People aren't actually able to read what it is they're agreeing to use Facebook and Google. So to me, there's some manipulation that these sites and other places are using to get you to use their site so that they can use your data. And to me, that's where the violation occurs. That it's because I have to use Google to do my job. Most people working in an office have to use Google. And so you have to agree to these terms. And even if you could read them, there's nothing you could do, because to work in any office job, you're using Google. So to me, that's where the issue of privacy comes in, is I don't really have a choice here. I'm not really agreeing. I don't know what it is I'm allowing you to do by using your services. And now you have all this data on me and you're sending it out to all these third parties. And it's just out there now in the world. And I never really made the choice to allow you to do that. Not in any sense of what we would actually understand by the definition of contract law, by the definition of your right to privacy. And that's where I start getting I don't know what the answer is, because you have, in Europe, you have the GDPR, which is this big privacy framework and privacy bureaucracy. And the GDPR and the EU have gone after Facebook and Google and issued these huge fines for violations. And we have privacy laws in the United States. I don't think we actually need a whole new giant framework to protect privacy. I think it's enforcing the privacy laws we have. And I think it would take a major change to how we interpret these terms of use on these sites. I think that's really needs to be revisited. That's really a contract issue as much as it is a privacy issue, that people really aren't agreeing to these terms in a way that should be legally binding on them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know what? That's a pretty good definition, actually. I do like that.
I think it was a horrible definition. I just talked for 5 minutes.
No,
I don't think any definition should take that long. But that's just sort of how
I do like it, because, yeah, it's you are right in that a lot of times you use products because you sort of have to, and I think one of the most egregious examples was it Twitter, who collected your phone number for 2FA purposes and used it for marketing.
Right.
That's horrible. That's atrocious. Like that is.
But I'm sure I'm sure there's somewhere in their terms where they're able to do it. There was nothing they did that violated the terms, and so therefore we say, oh well, that's legal, and that's, you consented to it by agreeing to the terms, and that's where I say no. I don't think you actually did consent to it. I don't think we can. I think that you're making a joke of what consent means if you're saying that agreeing to these terms is consent.
Yeah. I definitely see that point, and it makes a lot of sense. I think that you're right in that is what privacy is. Essentially, it's for the information that sort of the byproducts actually of our information, our usage of something, where we don't expect. Let's say it's like the second year of Google being on the market. It's the first time you hear of Google. You go use it. You start searching everything. It just wouldn't cross your mind that Google would sell this data, right? And what happens is that it's precisely what they did. It's precisely what everyone started doing. And I think you're right that in that case, privacy is the choice to, determine how your data is used. But even so, I would still rank my data, the importance of my data. It's not to say, look, the whole conversation over the ad-sponsored revenue model of the entire internet, that's a whole other conversation, and whether there was a way around it, whether that could have been avoided, whether there is any other sustainable model. But the fact that it is, of course, just necessitates a certain sort of environment. But, I feel like in the privacy security space, a lot of people will try to put like your Google search behavior on the same level as like your private, like legal documents or something, and saying that we need privacy for both. I'm not saying a lot of people would, but for me personally, I would like to distinguish between those two and call one privacy and call one security, and say unequivocally that security is more important than privacy. And the reason, to me, this may sound obvious, I don't know if it's obvious or blasphemous. To me, this is an evolution of my thinking, because I've always in the past put them on the same level. And now I'm saying privacy is a sort of, look, governments. So in that case, privacy typically, we're typically talking about privacy in the context of third-party corporations or private corporations. Governments are all too happy to give you privacy. You have all these privacy bills and laws being signed. They're all too happy to give you all that, because what does that do? That reins in corporations. Governments love reining in corporations. What governments won't give you is encryption. That's the thing they want to take away from you. Why? Because it's much more valuable to them, to everyone, is the power over encryption. And so people will try to equalize privacy and encryption and say that, they're out in the streets saying, we want privacy, we want encryption. It's like, no. If you're going to go in the streets, stop fighting for privacy. You're going to get privacy. Like that's just where we're headed, because that's sort of a battle between, well, that's an easy one, I would say. Whereas encryption, I think encryption is one of those timeless issues that's just going to always exist, like gun rights and abortion and these types of things. It's always going to waver and oscillate, and it depends on who's pushing harder on the gas. Um, I think most people, the average person who cares about privacy, isn't out there fighting for encryption, and I think that's a travesty. I think the fact that actually it's only like really specialized people that would think to say, let's prioritize encryption over privacy, because the masses are more interested in privacy because that's what the sort of I don't know. I don't want to say propaganda, but that's sort of what the zeitgeist is. Right. That's what the narrative is. And I think if you focus too much on that, you lose sight of what's important, which is encryption, the thing that's being threatened. The thing, if we lose everything. I mean, if we lose encryption, it's over. Like, I don't know that I'm not going to end myself, but I don't know if I want to live in a world that doesn't have encryption. Like, can you imagine that you can't communicate with your friends with privacy, like with encrypted privacy? And so there I said privacy, but I want to be clear that privacy just means encrypted privacy there. Like, that's very technical. It's very concrete. So encryption allows for privacy, but privacy doesn't always mean encryption. So yeah, I would just say, I'm not sure if people are having the same dilemma, but I would just say encryption and security are far more important than privacy, if there is a distinction. I believe there is, but I'm sort of thinking about this a lot. It's an iterative sort of idea for me where I think about and change my mind on a lot, just depending on the landscape. And so, yeah, that's where I'm sort of at.
So how do you answer, because there have been, government agencies and law enforcement organizations that come out against encryption all the time. Every time a new site talks about adding encryption, there's a statement by a law enforcement agency fighting it. So how do you respond to their concerns? I mean, because they would say there's someone is using standard notes to commit a crime, and we need to be able to access those notes to help prosecute that crime, to help find that person, so this doesn't actually get committed. How would you respond to that concern?
So, that's one of those questions where, look, not everything has an answer. This is my belief that not everything needs to have an answer. I think a lot of people expect most controversial issues to have like a technical answer. Most problems afflicting society at scale don't really have answers in the satisfying sort of sense where it's like you ask ChatGPT and it just lays it out, like drills it out exactly. It's like these things are hard and they're sort of quantum in nature. It's like depending on, they're iridescent. It's like depending on how you look at it, you might change your mind. I don't think that we have to have so I'll answer your question, but I do want to preface with saying that I think a lot of these issues are just trade-offs inherently. It's sort of like some natural law that, or some kind of quantum law, or I don't know, some kind of physical law that not all problems are technical. A lot of problems are softer than that, and they don't have answers, and it just depends on who you ask and who and what goals you're trying to solve and what problems you're trying to solve. So if you say, well, what about the FBI and the NSA who need this information to combat crime at scale and terrorism? Look, sometimes they do exaggerate, but there is some truth that you need intelligence to have an intelligence agency. And you need an intelligence agency if you're going to compete in the marketplace of countries. If you don't have an intelligence agency, they will, and they will outsmart you, and they'll outmaneuver you, and they'll be able to rein in their population better for, all these different advantages. And so, what are your goals? Are your goals to design a safer country, or are your goals to have a more independent country? I mean, what is society? Society is conformity. You can't have conformity if everyone is independent. If everyone is just by themselves and super, I don't know, rebellious, there's no society. Society is conformity. Society is sort of cohesion. It's togetherness. And individualism is at odds with that. So what problem do you want to solve? Do you want to build a better country, or do you want people to be more independent? Neither of those are right or wrong. if you ask me, I want to be more independent. But who do I belong to? Do I belong to myself? Do I belong to the country? Um, it sounds obvious. Like, yeah, I belong to myself. Well, you're in a country, and at any given moment, they can draft you into some war, and go, and your life is very dispensable. So, who do you really belong to? I don't have an answer, but these are serious questions, and so you know these the question of encryption is complicated. It's like gun ownership. I probably shouldn't talk all about gun ownership because I haven't thought too much about it, or I do, but you can see that it's a complicated problem because if you take away guns, then how do you protect yourself? I don't know if you've watched The Last of Us or The Walking Dead. Every time I watch one of those movies, I was like, man, I need to get some guns, like
Right.
just to protect yourself.
Right.
And the more cohesion you have, the less of a need you have for these sort of things. But it is a scale. It is a problem of trade-offs. I think Barack Obama said after the Snowden revelations that he's like, look, folks, we're going to have to make some trade-offs as a society. We're going to have to ask some tough questions. Like, we got to have some security, and there are trade-offs here. And look, when it comes to trade-offs, your only job is to play for your team. That's all you could do. I tend to oscillate a lot between in terms of because I know what I want for myself. I want encryption, and actually, I want it for everyone. It's non-negotiable for me, but it is a problem. I can see that it is a problem for intelligence agencies, and I can see that running a country might have a certain set of requirements that I have no idea about, and it seems to be a requisite for a country to have a functioning intelligence agency for war, for domestic affairs. I don't know the details there, but it seems to be requisite, and I think that our only jobs is that I'm going to play my part. I'm going to wear my jersey that says encryption on it. They'll wear their jersey that says NSA on it, and we'll fight it out. And the purpose is, no one's ever going to win. It's like the tug of war or something. The knot will be on one side or the other, but no one really ever wins. I think it's just somewhere in the middle. And actually, I don't know. I think our team is kind of winning right now because we have encryption. Everywhere we want it, almost nowhere where we can't find it. Even Monero hasn't gone away. Like that's the most killer application I think of. And for those who don't know what Monero is, that's just a privacy focused like Bitcoin alternative where no one can know where you're sending money or how much money you have. And that's a killer. That's probably the most killer application of crypto, and they can't do anything there. So we're definitely winning. But I don't know. It seems like they're not relenting, and so we can't relent either. But I don't want to just flat out say that these problems are easy. I don't think there are easy solutions, but I don't think that matters for a game of the game that we're trying to play. I think as long as you know what you want,
Right.
fight for that, and they'll fight for what they want, and that's the way the world goes.
One of my favorite economists is Thomas Sowell, and he has this well-known line that sounded like he took it from your mouth. He said, "There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs." And so I think that really is the perspective with everything. And I think people, when the internet kind of first broke out, there was this utopian view of the internet's just going to kind of change everything, and everything's going to be great and open and perfect. And now we're starting to realize, no, there's trade-offs with everything on the internet, just as there are everywhere else. And so you're right that you need advocates on both sides so that we can kind of figure out where that happy middle is. And so we need people like you, because most of the most powerful institutions probably are going to be anti-encryption, because those are the ones that they want to maintain their power. They don't want people doing stuff that they don't know about. And so we need someone like you who's very strongly going to advocate for encryption and have that voice. But for you to also have that humility of saying, hey, I don't know everything. They probably do have some concerns that are valid that I'm just not privy to. But my role is to be the advocate for this side, because this is the side that I know, and kind of let the chips fall where they may. On kind of the business side of Standard Notes, you've said you've started to see growth the last couple of years. Are you seeing more people? Because there's always polls out there of people saying, hey, they want privacy. Like if Gallup puts out a poll saying, do you want more online privacy? 95% of people say, yes, I do. But then you also see Facebook and Google making record profits. So you kind of see the revealed preferences of people don't seem to be moving towards more privacy, even though that's what they say they want. So are you seeing, is the growth of standard notes coming from people who are actively, is it normal people who are just saying, I'm actually going to make this step now of leaving the big tech companies and going to something that advocates privacy first? Or is it more of a technical, is it more like people like me, like I actively sought out standard notes because I'm always seeking out more privacy focused things? So I guess my question is, do you know who your average customer is?
So to answer your question about a couple questions, but yeah, the first point about the growth of privacy as a movement, in 2014, 2015, I turned vegan for like 3-4 months. And during that point, during that time, I think I was propagandized by some documentary,
Sure.
which I'm glad I went through it, because I learned. I don't want to talk about veganism right now, but
Yeah,
I've learned
please.
that it is okay to look, humans have been eating meat far before I ever existed, far before, for hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know. It's not, we didn't create this world. We're just
Right.
sort of in it, and this world is kind of crazy, and it's just the way it works. And so that's why I opted out of veganism after a while. But during that point, there was always this section in Whole Foods. It's like a small little fridge where they had a vegan section. And every time that I went in there, I was like, oh, I wonder if it expanded. I wonder if veganism is picking up. I wonder if more and more people become vegans, and one day the whole thing will have a shelf, like a whole aisle of vegan foods. This was 2014, 2015. It's 2023 today, and the section in Whole Foods has seemed to have gotten smaller. The vegan section has gotten smaller, if not the same size. But from where I stood there at that point, I felt that because I was very passionate about veganism, I thought everyone else might be, and because I got into it, other people might get into it, and maybe I'm some kind of like sign of some kind of movement or something. So that's the analogy I'll draw here. Is that while I think, I wonder if privacy is a bigger movement than veganism. I think it probably is. Yeah, I think it might be safe to say that it's bigger than veganism, but the question of whether privacy is growing, I don't know. It's tricky, and I don't want to model our growth to say that we're growing, so privacy must be growing. I don't want to say that, because that's just not conclusive. But privacy is, when it comes to software, it's tricky because it's trade-offs. Once again, when you're involving privacy, it means that the server is sort of agnostic to your thoughts and is limited in what it can do with your data. And in some cases, you want the server to process your data. Imagine if you couldn't use ChatGPT. Well, actually, that's the whole conundrum right now, is that a lot of applications that don't care about privacy have integrated ChatGPT API into their apps, and now all these apps are getting superpowers. And Microsoft Office today announced like chat or like LLMs for Microsoft Office to create spreadsheets and documents and presentations. So these are superpowers that a privacy focused application probably wouldn't be able to pull off, because it requires the power of a supercomputer in some server center. And I don't know if it's a hopeful cause for privacy applications, because you might say, well, maybe one day the AI models will be so small that you can run them on your phone. That may be so, but whatever you can run on your phone, you can run 100 times larger models on the server. And so the server models will always be better. And so there'll always be this trade-off between power and privacy if power comes from data centers. And so, again, if you asked me this question 3-4 months ago, I might say privacy is unstoppable, but now it's like, well, AI is unstoppable. And I don't know, are people going to start expecting AI in every application? Are we not going to be able to live without AI, a little AI Clippy in every single application? That's the question. And if it turns out, I don't know. I don't. It's very hard to tell right now if it's a fad or if it's here to stay. I mean, the technology is here to stay. I'm not sure if it being incorporated into every single productivity application, I'm not sure if that's here to stay. It seems like it might be. It seems hard to do away with. If that is the case, then yeah, privacy applications, I don't know, will not be able to compete, at least on that front, which is why I'm sort of advocating, at least for us, our position now is less so on privacy and more so on security, because privacy heads are iffy. They're sort of, they waver. They're not as hardcore. It's because privacy is negotiable. Right. Security heads, they don't waver. They don't mess around. Like they want security. They're going to have security, and they're not going to negotiate it. And there's no being on the fence of security. It's like you're either in the vault or you're outside of the vault. And so for us, our focus on security means that we're not concerned about AI tools or integration into our application, because if you want security, there's only one place to get it. It's applications, for one, that don't have AI integration. So I can't say conclusively that privacy is this sort of unstoppable movement, because every person that interacts with privacy has to, and again, I'm using the word privacy, but it's such a loaded term. I hope that goes without saying, but every user that interacts with a privacy-oriented tool might have to give something up. Not all the time. I mean, I don't know. Let's say DuckDuckGo versus Google. You're not losing that much. I mean, you could get by 90% of the time with DuckDuckGo. Who needs a search engine anymore now that you've got ChatGPT anyway? So I don't know. I think that if the privacy ecosystem continues to create really compelling applications, like Proton creates really great applications, I would describe them as a leader in sort of the mass privacy mainstream movement. They've got like 70 million users, and they've created really great applications. Their email client is amazing. Now, of course, I bet you that they're reckoning with the AI revolution that's happening right now. Like Google's rolling out, Gmail's rolling out some AI features for summarization and things like that, composition. Proton won't be able to do that, at least not with server-side models. They'll probably have to create some kind of client-side model, or and I don't know if that's going to be how big of a hindrance. It's kind of too soon to tell what kind of hindrance or effect that will have. But I think there is an asterisk on privacy in general, and it's not this sort of unstoppable movement. I think it should be, but again, most people, it's really weird for me that most people, like there are people with like 1 million followers on Twitter who post pictures of their baby children and their wife. I don't get it. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, but that's the norm. Like, not the norm on Twitter, but it's a norm on Facebook. It's a norm on Instagram. Like normal people, when you grow up, the undeveloped human brain is not thinking about privacy for some reason. It seems to be like a learned trait or an educated trait. It's like you learn. It's like it's wise. It's prudent. That takes some learning to do, and not everyone learns that skill, like tradecraft. And I think that, yeah, most people are like that, and the fact that Facebook, did I read that they're still posting like record revenues? I'm not sure. 2 billion users, like that's 2 billion people that don't care about privacy compared to 70 million that do. So I don't know. It's a huge asterisk overall. It's always really been.
Right.
Nothing's changed. And now with AI, I'm just not sure where it's all headed. But I know where security's headed. Security will always have a need more than ever now, especially like all this talk about protecting ourselves from China and Russia, and not trusting like TikTok on our phones and things like that. Security is ever growing in necessary need. I mean, it's clear that we need it for ourselves. And I think that's a market that's worth capitalizing on, and I don't think that's going anywhere.
And again, people who will answer in a poll that they want more online privacy, but they'll also use ChatGPT all day and be posting whatever, just feeding this AI machine that's going to know more and more about themselves and about everyone. If security becomes your focus, how do you compete then against Apple or Google, because they also provide security and probably a higher level of security than just because of their resources than what anyone else could provide. And you can use end-to-end encryption as an example. If you have end-to-end encryption, I think Facebook announced that either they're working on it or they already have made Facebook Messenger end-to-end encrypted, and probably they're seeing the success of something like Signal, the messaging app with end-to-end encryption. They can just incorporate the best parts of what you have or what you introduce from a security position and still make all their money from ad revenue and everything else that they're doing, and then just say, oh, and by the way, we're secure, we have end-to-end encryption. How does Standard Notes then compete with that? It's weird because it's from a privacy advocate perspective, you're like, or a security advocate perspective, you're like, oh, that's great that these big companies are adopting all these protocols. But as a CEO of a smaller company, I feel like it'd get pretty annoying if anytime you introduce something that works really well, that the bigger companies just let you be their R&D and they just adopt whatever you introduce.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, and most people really who are privacy oriented don't want big tech. Like, that's a huge part of it, is they don't want to use Google. They don't care what Google does. They don't want to use Google. They don't want to use Facebook. And the truth is that these companies just have different priorities. Their priorities will never be security and privacy as their number one bullet item. It's just sort of like transactional, operational, in service, or on the way to their like real goals, which are ever changing, ever growing, hard to keep up with. So I think that there'll always be a case for, look, we're not trying to be $1 billion company. Like, that's not our goal. We are a niche product. We're a security oriented note taking app. And, I think that'll always have its own market. And I think that while, I don't know who could compete with us. Let's say Google Keep adds end-to-end encryption. That might check off some check boxes for some users, but you still have a tremendous amount of sort of things that we specialize in. And maybe I'll go into them a little bit with regards to the privacy and security standard notes and things that might be hard for other companies to do. So one is, we are open source. And this will be the hardest thing for Facebook and Google to do. Facebook is actually really good at open source, but only for like libraries and frameworks, not like entire applications.
Can you just define open source for people who don't know what that is?
Yeah. Open source just means that the code we use, that we write to build our applications, is available online for anyone to see and download and remix or do anything they want with, essentially, using a website called GitHub. And every time we make a change to our code, GitHub will create like a change log, and you could just follow along with everything that we're doing. And most companies do not open source their code for obvious reasons. For us, we've been open source since day one, and this is really important for us as a privacy security oriented company, because it allows you and smart people to validate our claims. When we say encrypted, when we say private, you're able to look at our code and attest to that. And a company like Google will never make Google Keep open source. And even Apple, Apple touts end-to-end encryption for their note-taking app or for their iCloud ecosystem, which their notes sync to. And that's not open source, and you have to trust them. And sure enough, we'll trust Apple. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But nonetheless, that's something that is hard to compete with. And for us personally, we say on our website, staunchly, that we believe the definition of open source should mean that, especially when it comes to end-to-end encryption, that your code is open source on both ends. The client is open source, the client application, the iPhone app, the macOS app, that's open source, and the server end is open source. Those two are not open source, you can't trust it. And yeah, it just becomes like take our word for it, and we have enough companies doing that. Like we're different. We have to be different, and it's the right way to do software development, security-oriented software development. And I don't know, a lot of incumbents might find that risky, but personally, I don't believe the value is in your code. It's more in the emergent sort of ecosystem in your team and your brand and things like that. And so I don't think it's as risky as it seems. Um, the second part is sort of just our privacy ethos when it comes to everything that we do. It's not just encryption. It's also, and here we can define privacy a little bit as for us, we don't collect your IP address. We don't log your IP address. We don't log your devices. Typically, every time you make an HTTP request to any server, the client will send your user agent, which describes your device name, the model, the operating system version. So servers know that information. We don't log that information. Most companies typically do because it's helpful for debugging. They're not like trying to spy on you, but it helps to know what kind of devices. But of course, it's very easy to correlate users knowing that information. We don't have analytics in our applications. We don't track how you use the application. We don't know where you click, how long you spend on a note. These are things that, for better or worse, we don't have, and we're not really interested in adding. This is rare. That most companies will have some sort of like behavioral analytics that they use to sort of educate product decisions and things like that. So it's kind of like Signal. Like Signal collects the least amount of metadata. For us, we collect the least amount of metadata possible. We only collect what's needed for syncing your notes from one device to the other, which is the timestamps at which you edit the notes and create the notes. Other than that, we have no idea what you're doing in our app, essentially. And so you get this sort of privacy that is cumbersome and hinders us as a product development team. These decisions to remove user agent logging and to remove product analytics, these hinder us as a team. We would love to be able to see when we roll out a feature, how many people are using it, how many people are not interested in it. Is it stable? Is it crashing? We have no idea. And, I'm bragging about it from a privacy perspective, but of course, any product person that would hear this would cringe. Trade-offs. For us as a privacy security oriented company, these trade-offs are very easy to make. We've made these decisions in the past, and you'll always know what decisions we'll make in the future. We'll always make decisions that prioritize your privacy and security over things that are detrimental to us, like lack of analytics, or maybe detrimental to you, lack of AI. You know where we stand. Whereas with other services who may just have encryption as a bullet list item, you don't know where they stand. You don't know how they'll evolve in the future. You don't know how their privacy policy will change in the future. You don't know what kind of analytics they collect, what kind of usage behavior they collect, which really can be sometimes as important as the content itself. So these are sort of the ethos that only a sort of niche, highly specialized application explicitly focused on security can develop, while other apps can only really cross off end-to-end encryption. But that's where you start. That's just a starting point. There's so much more that goes into it. Now, beyond the privacy security, of course, we started as a very simple note-taking app, very standard. But we're also really powerful. We do things. There's a very standard layer of how we do things, but we also offer a lot of power that you just won't find in other applications. We have spreadsheets and Markdown and rich text and sort of Google Authenticator replacement, file storage, encrypted images, encrypted videos, audio files, 2FA, email backups, a lot of themes, customizability. It is a unique sort of, if you get into it, it is unique. And, note-taking apps are not commodities. They are always opinionated. No matter how basic they start, they always end up taking like an opinionated turn. And we've taken one. And it's in the favor of power and flexibility and portability. And these things are hard to mimic. And I think when people try standard notes, one is you immediately feel the benefit and sort of the feeling you get of being in a private and secure encrypted space. You immediately see that your thoughts take on a different form, and you think more clearly and you think more courageously. Our slogan is "Write fearlessly," and you feel that immediately. Your writing takes on a better form of itself because you're dealing with hardcore encryption. You're dealing with the power of writing on a piece of paper that's in your house. We'll say the silliest things on those pieces of papers, but in that silliness is where the truths lie, where you get at things that you wouldn't otherwise get at. I guess another analogy would be that, if you're with a therapist or something, if you don't trust them, you're not going to spill your beans. But as soon as you develop that intimate relationship, you can make progress. And so it's the same thing with standard notes. It is your therapist, your trustworthy therapist, for you to spill your sort of heart into that you just wouldn't feel with Google Keep or Evernote or something like that. Yeah. And that's sort of the distinction that I think that will perpetually keep us alive and not really worried about what come what may from Evernote and Google Keep and the likes.
And I can attest to that. Like I said, I love standard notes. I love writing in it. And there's a free version of it, which you get the notes, you get the end-to-end encryption. The free version itself is excellent. But there's also the paid version, which is where you get all those extra deep features. And the paid version's awesome. It's totally worth it as well. So I suggest everyone check that out. Standardnotes.com. As Mo said, you can get it across all platforms. Mo, I could talk to you forever. I'm so glad you came out of your cave to talk about this, because again, I think standard notes is so important and I love it. And you have the face and the voice to be a public face. So I'm glad the world needs you out there. So not only just for standard notes, but just to have you visually there. But I just think standard notes to me is so important. I'm going to keep singing its praises. Because I come from the legal world where everyone wants the solution to be another law. And as we've talked about this whole time, everything's trade-offs, and especially with laws, there's always trade-offs to laws and everything that comes with them. So my ideal is to have entrepreneurs like you who have a new idea, a new product they can put out there that's better than what already exists, and have people voluntarily choose to go to those better products. And that's how you change the world. That's how we make privacy and security a focus, is by people going to options like standard notes and having people like you creating options like standard notes that are both privacy first, privacy focused, security first, security focused, but also just excellent products in and of themselves. And so the more people go to that, the more I think that's how you change the world, is by one people voluntarily choosing to pick those products over the big tech options. So Mo, again, thanks for talking with me. Thanks for creating standard notes. Anything else you want to say before we go here?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. This was awesome. Yeah, I mean, check out Standard Notes, standardnotes.com. Follow us on Twitter. We're working on a few cool things, a web clipper, hardware authentication, maybe a little advanced for your audience, but it's like 2FA on steroids. Some more security things that would be really hard or really tedious for other products to build or focus on. But yeah, standardnotes.com. It's free. You can get most things for free. It's only when you want really advanced features like file storage or things like that you have to pay and to support our work. But yeah, that's all from me.